Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Gruzas. I'm the Director of the Graduate and International Programs Office here at USC Gould, and today I'm going to talk to you about the bar exam. So just to give you an overview of what it is, the bar exam is one of the licensing requirements to become a licensed attorney in the US. And in the US, each state is able to govern the requirements for being able to practice law, which means that each state often has its own bar exam and licensing requirements. So if you want to practice law in, say, California, you would need to complete the California bar exam and any of its licensing requirements and be sworn in here in California. And you would not generally be able to port that, to take that with you to another state and practice law. You would need to be licensed in each state that you were wanting to practice law. And there's some, technicalities around that with federal law and working with local counsel in a different state. But that's kind of the general rule. If you want to practice law anywhere in the US, you want to be licensed in that state. So when you're thinking about the bar exam, it's helpful to know what to expect. And it's in California and the UBE, it's a 2 full day exam. It's, I think, 6.5 or 7 hours each day. On the first day, you will have to answer 200 multiple choice questions. This is known as the MBE part of the bar exam. And on the second day, you'll answer essays and written performance tests. The subject matter for each part of the exam differs. So the subjects tested on the MBE is very discrete. The good news is that there is overlap. So some of the subjects tested on the MBE could be tested in the essay part as well. California uses the MBE, but will have also state-specific topics on the essay and performance test questions. So there are basically two types of bars in the US. So there are states that utilize what we call the uniform bar exam and states that have their own exam. So they're state specific. For the states that have the uniform bar exam, so you can see in orange, all of those states in orange use the UBE, and essentially it's the same test. So whether you take the test in Washington State or Texas or Alaska, you're taking the exact same test, assuming you're taking it the same date. And that's different from the state-specific exams, which may or may not include portions of the UBE. So you can see that New York, Washington State, and the District of Columbia all have adopted the UBE. Each state has its own pass score and may have other licensing requirements for admission. So again, the bar exam is just one part of your path to being licensed in the US. If you meet the passing score for that jurisdiction for the UBE, you may be able to apply for a license in that state, even if you took the exam in another state. So one of the good things about the UBE is that it's possibly portable. So once you take it and you receive a passing score in Colorado and you want to move to North Dakota, assuming you are eligible to transport your score, you wouldn't necessarily have to take the exam again. So it's a huge benefit of taking the UBE is that possible portability. And this graphic just shows you what the pass scores are for each jurisdiction. And there's a pretty wide range. So depending on where you're looking, if you're thinking about trying to be licensed in multiple jurisdictions, you'd want to be familiar with the pass rate, or excuse me, the pass score. So unfortunately, California does not participate in the UBE. It's a state-specific exam. The big deal with that is that if you want to practice in California, you have to take the California bar exam. and there's no reciprocity with any other state. So even if you take the New York bar and you pass and you become licensed in New York or any other jurisdiction, you would still want and need to take the California bar to become licensed here if you wanted to practice in California. California does include the MBE, part of the UBE, so there is some overlap, but it uses its own essays and performance tests for the second day. In terms of the format, on the UBE, essays are just 30 minutes. In California, they're an hour, so you have more essays that you need to complete with the UBE. I think there's 6 essays in the morning session, and in California, you have 3 essays in the morning session. And these are kind of like your typical law school exam. You'll be presented with a fact pattern, and you'll need to identify any causes of action or relevant issues that you spot in the fact pattern. And this can be, you'll want to be mindful that the fact pattern can present multiple issues across a variety of different legal areas. So you might have issues relating to torts as well as property, constitutional law, I mean, the whole gamut. So just be careful as you're reading these fact patterns to highlight any potential issues that you see. The performance test is really meant to test how you'll be as an attorney, and it does that by presenting you with a task that can be typical of attorney work, including a legal memo or a client letter or a discovery plan. And so when you get the performance test, what you'll get is a packet, and it can include many different documents. It might include, several different fact patterns, and you'll use all of that information to respond to the prompt, whatever it is. So these are the written portions of the exam. So one of the best things I think about the MBE is that it has these very concrete topics that you will be tested on. And in fact, there's, I can't remember, but if you go to the UBE website, I think they give you a breakdown, but you can expect, I think, a certain number of questions in each of these areas. The good thing about that is that if you study constitutional law, you're going to use your knowledge on the MBE portion. So these are subjects that we recommend students focus on because it will certainly show up in the MBE, and it's possible that it could also show up in the essay portion. And these are a list of subjects that could come up in the essay portion of the UBE. So you can see there's a wide variety of topics. And similarly in California, most of the subjects overlap. California does have its own state-specific laws that you'll need to become familiar with, such as community property, and I think California rules of evidence, and maybe some others. The bar exam is hosted in most years the exact same time all across the country, and that is the last Tuesday and Wednesday of each February and July. So you can see here the upcoming dates, and these might be relevant if you're planning to graduate in May or if you're planning to graduate in December. These would be the next bar dates for you. So as I mentioned previously, the bar exam is just one part of the licensing requirements. So if you take the bar and you pass and you don't do anything else, in most states, that's not enough to become licensed. You'll need to complete either a character and fitness or moral character application in every jurisdiction. And then in particular in New York, they have several additional licensing requirements that you'll need to be aware of and be sure to complete in order to be sworn in. These licensing requirements, I think, are very helpful for you to plan in terms of figuring out which bar exam is the best fit for you, but also to be sure that you're able to meet the licensing requirements such that you can get a license, right, to be able to practice. If you get halfway through and you pass the bar, but you can't ever complete the licensing requirements, you'll never have any benefit to that because you won't be able to be sworn in that. But you do have quite a bit of time. So typically, I think there's, I know in New York, there's about a 3-year window after you pass that you can use to complete these requirements. So there's, it's helpful to see what they are so you can start planning in advance. So here are the additional requirements in New York State. When New York transitioned from its own state-specific exam to the UBE, they implemented the New York Law course and the New York Law exam. And these are there to educate students on New York-specific state law and test students to make sure there's kind of a minimum proficiency with New York-based law. Additionally, there's a 50-hour pro bono requirement and a skills competency requirement, which I'll discuss in more detail shortly. And as I mentioned, you have up to 3 years after you pass the exam, and to the extent you can or have completed any of these up to 1 year before the LLM, you can apply these toward those licensing requirements. So the law course, it's a series of recorded online lectures on New York-based law. And it's interactive, which means that you watch it and then you need to answer questions as you're going through the program to make sure you're understanding the material. And I think you have to successfully answer the questions in order to continue moving on. Once you finish the course, you'll need to take and pass the exam. It's a multiple choice open book exam, and I think it just requires a 60% pass rate. So it's pretty straightforward. I will caution you that we've had issues in the past where students, maybe inadvertently passed through or fast forwarded through the content, and that was a violation of the terms of service for the New York Law course, and it meant that the student could not continue. And so you just want to be really careful when you're doing all of these programs, especially for your attorney license. They will expect that you will have read all of the terms and conditions and that you're following them to the letter of the law. The pro bono requirement is 50 hours. It has to be in specific qualifying pro bono work. New York defines that somewhat specifically. So what I would recommend is that you review the FAQs for the pro bono requirement to understand what kind of work will qualify. It can be done here in the US, it can be done any other country in the world. It does need to be substantive and legal. So things like translation services would not be sufficient. Thankfully, you can use multiple different work experiences to complete the 50 hours. So if you've done any pro bono work as an attorney, as a law student, I would recommend you look at the FAQs to see if it's qualifying. And if it is, you can request your supervisor to complete a form affidavit. So for each experience that you have, you'll need to have someone sign off on your affidavit to confirm that you did complete the requirements. And the final licensing requirement in New York is called the skills competency requirement. It's relatively new. It was introduced in 2018. And while there are 5 total pathways for students, for our specific USC LLM students, the pathways that are available to you are Pathway 4 or Pathway 5, and these are work-based experiences. So under Pathway 4, you can work as an assistant or a law clerk in a paid or unpaid position for 6 months full-time, or if you're licensed to practice and you work full-time for 1 year, you will have met this requirement. So those of you who are already attorneys may have already met this requirement if you've had more than 1 year of practice. So, hopefully it's not too burdensome to complete, but it might mean that you need to, find work before you're able to satisfy this to get your New York law license. So the character and fitness portion of the exam is, in California, it's primarily a background check. And I'm not sure exactly all of the questions that go into New York and DC or Washington State. But it's a fairly significant inquiry into your background to make sure there's no, wrongdoing or crimes of moral turpitude or anything like that. In New York and DC, the application is only available to you after you've passed the exam. In California, you can prepare for the exam and submit your application concurrent or before the bar exam. This is because it can take up to 1 year for California to process all of the moral character applications. And it does require fingerprinting as part of the application. So when we share the information about each state bar, you'll see information about how to complete these portions as well. Another licensing requirement for all states is what's called the MPRE. It's a professional responsibility exam. It's pretty straightforward. It's 2 hours, 60 multiple choice questions. It's offered 3 times a year. We do recommend that you either have taken legal profession before you take this exam or that you're concurrently enrolled, because it's a professional responsibility exam where you're going to need to know the model rules. It helps to have some class foundation before you take the exam. So most of our students, I think, end up taking the exam in March if they've started in the fall. We have had some students take it in August. I think if you're planning to take the July exam, signing up for the MPRE in the August following the bar exam might be a little ambitious. You might really not want to take another exam after the bar. So just think about that as you're planning how to complete these licensing requirements. So now that you know a little bit about the exam, it's really important to understand if you are eligible to sit for the exam. You'll also need to know if it's going to be helpful to you in your career, and if it will be helpful, figuring out which state exam to take. So we'll start with maybe the most important question, which is eligibility. So just as every state determines the licensing requirements, each state determines who and what is required to sit for that state's bar exam. And I want to be clear that every state requires bar takers to have a first degree in law. So in the US, the first degree is a JD. So if you have a JD, you have a lot of flexibility with the different state bars that you can take. If you have a first degree in law from outside of the US, then there are a few states that you might be able to sit for, but you would not be eligible to sit for every bar exam. So many states are closed to students with foreign legal education. California is the only state that recognizes attorneys as a basis to sit for the exam. So if you're licensed to practice anywhere in the world, you can sit for the California bar exam without needing any further legal education. If you want to practice law in a state where you are not eligible to sit for the bar in that state, you can look and see if there's possibilities for UBE reciprocity or another way to become licensed in that state. It's pretty challenging, so what I would recommend is if that's you know that there's a state you will be working in, to really carefully review that state bar's eligibility and licensing requirements. So should you take a bar exam? We strongly recommend that you take a bar exam if you know that you will be practicing in the US. So either you live here already or you're moving here, and you know that you're going to want to work as an attorney, you're going to need to have that US bar license. And similarly, whether you are planning to stay in the US or not, if a US bar might be required by your current or prospective employer, then certainly you would want to have that license. Now, you might strongly consider taking a bar exam if the kind of work that you're already involved in or that you want to become involved in will involve US-based clients or US-based law, or if you know that having a US bar will make you a more competitive applicant in the legal arena in your country. So some countries, I think, strongly prefer candidates that have maybe dual licensing. Other countries really don't care. So it really depends on your market and your interests. Now, you probably should not take a bar exam if you know you will not work in the US, you will not work with US-based clients, and also if the employers in your country do not have a preference for applicants with a US bar license. So, you might need to do a little bit of research to see what the market looks like, where you're planning to work, if you have any goal employers, what they look for in particular, and that can help inform your decision. So assuming you are interested in sitting for a bar exam, you'll want to figure out which exam of the few that you can take would be the right fit. So number one, and again, the very most important is, can you sit for the exam? Are you eligible to sit for that state's exam? The second is your interest in practicing there. If it's going to be very helpful for you to have that license, either because you know you're going to move there, it's relevant to the kind of practice area that you're interested in, or maybe there's a strong preference from your employer to have that particular state license. And also we recommend that you also think about the licensing requirements. So just being able to know that you can plan and complete all of those requirements is going to be really helpful as you're deciding which exam to choose. So if you still don't know and you're indifferent between all of the choices, we recommend picking the bar that has the highest pass rate. I think this is still New York State. And the reason we recommend the bar with the highest pass rate is, number one, once you have passed a bar, it gives you a lot of confidence to sit for another bar exam and know that you have what it takes to pass. Sometimes it can be challenging if you fail the first time and you're thinking about retaking the exam. That can be a little more challenging. And second, if you complete the licensing requirements and you are a licensed attorney, it gives you a lot more job options. So now you can look for attorney positions rather than law clerk or paralegal positions. So if you are in the position of you're still not sure if you should take a bar exam, we recommend that you at least plan on possibly taking it, which means we recommend that you start getting any required documents that you would submit for your eligibility determination. And this is because what happens is usually during the LLM, you might start and say, I don't need the bar, I don't want to take it. And then as you make friends and as you speak to other colleagues in your classes, you hear of others who are taking it, and then you don't want to lose this opportunity. So just to avoid any missed time, we recommend that you just plan as though you're going to take it. So some more pros and cons. As I mentioned, once you're licensed, you have access to a lot more jobs. It probably will increase your marketability in your home country. And it's really helpful to the extent you'll ever work with US-based clients, that they'll feel very confident in your understanding of US law. Why wouldn't you take the bar? So it's really hard. Unfortunately, the pass rate for first-time foreign educated applicants is about 13% in California and about 35% in New York. And I think it's around 30% for Washington State. It's expensive. So this includes the cost for registering for the exam, the cost for enrolling in a bar prep program, and then also what we call the opportunity cost of the time that you're spending preparing where you're not working. So there's a lot of kind of additional costs to be aware of. Depending on which bar exam you're sitting for and how you qualify, you may have a lot of specific classes that you need to take during your LLM to be eligible for the bar. So it might kind of restrict your elective opportunities. And then really important to note, just because you pass the bar and you become licensed does not guarantee a job. So unfortunately, it is helpful in that you will have access to a greater range of jobs, but there's no guarantee of employment. So now I'm going to talk about the process to register for the exam. And in most states, there's kind of a two-step process. So number one, you will confirm with that bar whether your education meets the eligibility requirements. And assuming that's great and they confirm your eligibility, then the next step would be to apply for the specific bar when the exam date opens, which usually happens a few months before the date of the exam. So for New York, they require quite a bit of advance timing, I guess. So the deadline to complete the online evaluation form and submit all of your documents is October 1st for the July exam. And they do recommend that you provide things at least 1 year in advance. And the things that you'll need to provide include an official transcript from all of the law schools you attended, your degree certificate. This is only required if your degree is not listed on your transcript. Proof of fulfillment of the educational requirements for admission to practice law in that country. So if you're already licensed, that's as simple as providing a copy of your admission certificate or certificate of good standing. And if you are not yet admitted, you'll have to provide some kind of proof that you meet all of the educational requirements to practice law or to sit for the exam. And finally, an accreditation statement. And this is from the accrediting agency, whoever accredits law schools, that the schools you attended were recognized and approved while you were studying there. So all of the documents that you send to the New York Bar need to be in a sealed envelope. And the New York Bar does indicate that it should be submitted directly from the institution. However, we actually recommend that you gather all of your documents together and submit them together from wherever you are, including from within the US or outside the US, it's fine. As long as the document hasn't been opened and the envelope remains sealed, it's not a problem. And the reason we recommend this is because you need to provide your bowl ID. So this is a number that will be given to you when you register. And this is how the New York Bar keeps track of all of your documents. So you'll need to put that on all of the documents that you send in. We usually recommend that you write it on the outside of the envelope. If any of your documents are not in English, they need to be translated. So what we recommend is if you have your official sealed transcript and you know it's not in English, that you request a second copy of your transcript that you can open and provide to a translator for that purpose. The translation does not need to be in a sealed envelope. So it's okay to have that kind of separate, but you just want to be careful. Do not open the sealed version that should be going to the bar. So as I mentioned, if you already have your sealed transcript, it's fine for you to send it from wherever you are. It does not have to be sent by your institution. We frequently get the question of whether you can use the evaluation that you submitted to LSAC. Unfortunately, no. Once you send your transcript to LSAC, that's it. And the bar examiners want to review your transcript directly, so they do not accept the LSAC evaluations. If you are from a law school where many other people from your law school have taken that state exam, you probably don't need to provide the proof of educational fulfillment or accreditation. If you're the first person from your school, or you're from a country that maybe not very many people sit for the US bar, you probably would need to provide those documents. Unfortunately, we don't have any samples or templates that you can use, but if you're not sure what you need to provide, certainly contact us and we can help you and help review your documents before you send them out. So in terms of timing, the first thing that you'll do is you'll start with the online evaluation. This is what will give you your bowl ID number. You will have to have created an account with NCBE. And then there's a process in the link, so you'll just follow that process. And it's also in the PDF that we'll share with you about the New York Bar. And this one is really important. When you're going through the online evaluation, one of the questions that we'll ask, that will be asked of you, is where you're doing your LLM. Please be careful when selecting this. It needs to say the University of Southern California. I'm not sure what all of the options are, so it may not say Gould School of Law, but just be careful. I think some students have in the past been confused by USC. There's also a University of South Carolina. We are not the same school. It could delay your evaluation review if you select the wrong school. So the New York Bar advises that it could take between 6 months to a year for their eligibility determination. It doesn't always take that long, but it could also take longer. So we recommend that you send your documents really as soon as you have them. Unfortunately, even if you send everything by the deadline of October 1st, it does not guarantee that you'll receive a determination by the time the exam date opens. So even if you send everything October 1st, it could be that you don't have a result from New York in May or June, and you won't be able to sit for the July exam. Again, we recommend that you send all of your documents together as much as you can to kind of minimize delay. And unfortunately, the New York Bar does not seem to work on a first come, first served basis. So it's highly likely that your friend who submitted their documents 2 months after you receives their confirmation before you do, and it really doesn't signify anything. They're working through the documents at their own rate in New York. So just because you haven't heard anything doesn't mean you will receive a negative determination. So just don't be too worried about that. In California, they bifurcate applicants based on whether you have a first degree in law, whether you have an attorney license or not. So if you are already licensed, you'll start as an attorney applicant, and if you're not yet licensed, you'll apply as a student. Unlike New York, California does not have a hard deadline, but we recommend, if you're planning to sit for the July exam, to really send in all of your documents and get the process started sometime in the fall semester, or at least 6 months before the exam. And this will give you enough time to make sure each step is completed and you're not kind of anxiously awaiting your determination when the registration opens. So if you're licensed, you are required to apply as an attorney. You can't apply as a student applicant. It's fairly straightforward. You will just, you'll start the online registration form. You will submit a certificate of good standing from your home country, and you'll pay the fee. You don't have to take any classes at all, so we will not submit your transcript from USC to the California Bar. It's not required. You are eligible just on the basis of your license. So for students, if you're not licensed to practice, you can only apply as a student. And California, unlike New York, uses a third-party agency to review transcripts. So what you'll do is submit your transcript to this, one of the, I think there's 7 or 8 approved credential agencies. And they will make a determination, and they will either send that determination back to you to send to the California Bar, or they'll send it right on to the California Bar. Otherwise, your process is very similar. So you'll complete the online registration form. You'll have the credential evaluation agency complete this report. You'll pay your fee. And in addition, you'll need to complete at least 12 units of California Bar subjects while you're enrolled in the LLM. California is usually much faster than New York in terms of submitting an eligibility determination. So typically, I would say it's between 2 to 3 months. It could certainly be sooner than that. It may also take more time. So if you haven't received a determination after 3 months, don't be alarmed. But it's pretty straightforward as long as the credential evaluation agency determines that you either hold a first degree in law or your degree is equivalent to a USJD, you'll be eligible. So it's no problem. If you're interested in a different state than California or New York or Washington State or District of Columbia, I would really recommend that you review this link at the bottom of this page because you may or may not be eligible to sit for that exam. So foreign educated applicants, there are only a few states that you'll be eligible for. So please review that to see whether you're able to sit for the exam. And as it says here, most of our students do sit for New York is probably the biggest, then California. We have a few students sit for DC every year. And this year we also created courses to enable students to meet the eligibility requirements for Washington State. So if you are not eligible for a bar exam, this is likely because you do not have a first degree in law. You are kind of limited, unfortunately, in your options. So a really obvious path could be to enroll in a JD because then you have a lot of options after graduation. If you could complete the attorney licensing requirements in your home country, you could come back and sit for the California Bar, or you're really kind of restricted to looking for jobs that do not require an attorney license. So in terms of the timing, I would say the vast majority of students who graduate in May end up taking the exam in July while they're here in the US, while the material is still fresh. I really strongly, as much as I can encourage you not to, do not take the exam while you're enrolled in the LLM. It's just, you know, not great planning. You know, to be honest, I think it would be a waste of your time and money. you would not be able to prepare adequately for either the exam or your courses. And speaking from experience of having taken the California bar exam, it's not something that you want to do just to see. It's really stressful. So please don't think about doing that, and save yourself some grief. If you are a 2-year LLM and you're thinking about taking the bar exam before your LLM year because maybe you're already a licensed attorney, still, again, we don't recommend it. You really would benefit from taking additional bar courses and having more time in the US at a law school before you sit for the exam. So we really, really strongly encourage students to wait until after graduation. So in terms of preparation, there are a few things that you can do. So we'll talk about what you can do now before the LLM starts. I think most of the things that we've already talked about. So figuring out, do you need the bar exam? If you need the bar exam, which state exam should you take? Getting all of your documents ready and starting the registration process. Making sure you understand any additional licensing requirements for that exam. And I think it's really helpful to become familiar with the state bar website, whichever state that is. So you understand where to find information if you're looking for something, how to contact them if you have questions. You can also look at past exams. I think New York and California both have past exams on their website. And it's really helpful to think about continuing to work on your English reading and typing fluency and speed. So I think one of the competitive advantages that native English speakers have is we don't have to translate anything as we're reading the question and as we're typing our answer. So if it's not comfortable to you to read quickly or to answer quickly, that's something that you can certainly work on and improve now and during the LLM. And you can also start studying for the topics. You can sign up for a commercial bar prep course. So those are companies like Barbary or Themis or Kaplan that run a specific program to prepare students for the exam. Or you can review commercial outlines. So we'll talk about that now. So commercial outlines are created by companies, and they're meant to help students understand the breakdown of law. They're typically specific to Black letter law, so subjects like contracts, torts, criminal law, constitutional law. You'll find commercial outlines for those, and this can be really helpful whether you're taking the class or not. And as I mentioned, here are the links to review the past exams for California and New York. The exams might be a little old, but I think it is helpful to look at not only the format of the question, but the format of the answer. So to see, what you're going to be asked, how much information you need to provide, and how long the questions and the answers are. I think you might be surprised with how much content there often is in an essay answer. So during the LLM, things that you can do, obviously you're going to need to enroll in all of the required courses that you need to take, and then you might consider enrolling in some additional elective units depending on your interest. We'll have early bar prep workshop series where you can learn a little bit about the content of the exam as well as the format. You can start preparing on your own with self-study or by taking the MPRE, and also preparing in terms of research and enrollment in a commercial bar prep program. Again, this is like Barbary, Themis, Kaplan. There are so many of them now. And after the LLM, this is kind of how it works. You'll graduate, you'll enroll in your bar prep program, really work hard to complete all of the assignments and take the practice exams under timed conditions. And you'll basically be doing that as a full-time job and a part-time job. You'll be working overtime to prepare for the bar between graduation and the exam. And after you take the bar exam, you can think about completing any other licensing requirements. So that was it for the presentation. I wanted to touch very quickly on some frequently asked questions that often come up. And I'm sorry I don't have a slide for this. But number one, very common question. I know that you need a first degree in law to sit for the bar. How can I know if I have one? It's a little difficult because it's typically not defined by the bar. And part of that, I think, is because it just varies so much by country. But really what they're looking to see is, did you meet all of the educational requirements in your country to sit for the bar? And I want to be really careful about what that means, because in some countries, there might be a practical apprenticeship or training period or training course that you need to take. And depending, on the bar, they might consider that part of the educational requirements. So it's not something that we can advise you on. Only the bar administration can tell you if you're eligible for that state, but you're certainly welcome to ask us if you have questions. I mentioned this previously, but it also comes up. Can I please just use my LSAC transcript or transcript evaluation instead of having to do this process again? Unfortunately, no, the bar examiners would not accept the LSAC evaluation. So you're going to have to send your documents directly to them or to their evaluation agencies. Do I have time to enroll in a certificate as well as prepare for the bar? Absolutely. I would say the vast majority of our students enroll in a certificate and take a bar track. So it's certainly possible. It may require some planning, and it may also depend on the state that you're interested in. So for example, the District of Columbia bar requires a very high number of course units. So you may or may not be able to fit in a certificate, but for the other states, you should have that flexibility. Another question that comes up is, do I have enough time? The LLM is only 1 year. How can I possibly know everything I need to know by the time the exam comes around? So you won't. It's it's really hard, and even if you did the JD, you wouldn't know everything just because there's so many questions and topics that the bar exam covers. This is why we recommend commercial bar prep programs after graduation. These companies are really invested in making sure students pass, right? They pride themselves on their pass rates, and so they're going to give you as much content and learning as they can to ensure that you're going to be successful. And I just want to be clear that I'm not sure what the statistics are, but I would guess between 95 to 98% of JD students enroll in a commercial bar prep program. So, they're not relying on the 3 years of studies that they had at law school. They're really looking at that commercial bar prep program to help them remember what they learned, understand how to answer questions in the way that the bar examiners are looking for, and focus on what's most important. So, they can be expensive. If it's a priority to you to have a US bar license, I would strongly, strongly recommend it. People ask me all the time what I used. I took Barbary. I do want to say that when I took the bar, which was a long time ago, there was only Barbary, and Themis, I think, Kaplan had just started. So everyone was too nervous to take Kaplan, and we all stuck with Barbary. That said, I really enjoyed the Barbary experience. I felt that the content was great, but a lot of new companies have started since I graduated. So please, spend some time to research the different options to see what is a good fit for you. And the final question that I'll address now is whether we have pass rates for our students. So unfortunately, no. I know it would be so helpful if I could share that with you, but the truth is it's just very, very challenging for us to track. because often students, after they've taken the bar exam and they leave the country, they don't respond to our emails, or they don't necessarily tell us when they've passed the bar. So it just has been something that's been very challenging for us to provide concrete numbers on. I think looking at our students kind of experientially and anecdotally, it does seem that the pass rates are very similar to the national averages, meaning many, many more of our students sit for the New York bar, and of those students, more of them pass than those for California. I guess I should add, some students will ask, why is the pass rate so different between the different states? Why is California so much harder than New York? I didn't take the New York bar, I took the California bar, so I don't have any basis for comparison. I'm not sure that either exam is harder than the other. I think some of it might just be the expectation. Some of it might be the, you're being graded against a pool, so how other people are doing in that particular exam. I think English reading speed and typing speed is very, very important. If you're a native English speaker, you can type a lot of content out in your answer that maybe you're not as quick to do. So these are things that you can really work on now and practice. But there's, many of our students pass the bar after graduation. There's no reason to think you can't. If it's a priority to you, you need to treat it as a priority, and you'll need to focus really full time on planning for the bar right after graduation. So I hope that this presentation was helpful for you. If you have any questions about this presentation or the exam itself, you are welcome to contact our office. Our email is gipcareers@law.usc.edu. And again, I hope this is helpful, and I look forward to working with you this year. So thank you very much.